We begin in Hungary, where US Secretary of State Marco Rubio is in Budapest for talks with Prime Minister Viktor Orban. After bilateral discussions with his Hungarian counterpart, the Foreign Minister Peter Szijjarto, he'll go on to meet the Prime Minister. The visit's the final stage of a whirlwind trip to Europe that also saw Mr. Rubio address the Munich Security Conference and visit another right-wing ally. That's the Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico on Sunday. The Budapest stopover is being seen as a campaign boost for Viktor Orban, whose Fidesz party is trailing the opposition ahead of legislative elections in April. Straight to Budapest then, and DW correspondent Ferenc Gaal. Welcome, Ferenc. What are the main items on the agenda for Marco Rubio's visit today?
On the official agenda for today's visit, during which Secretary of State Marco Rubio is poised to visit, both Prime Minister Viktor Orban and Foreign Minister Peter Szijjarto, are two items. The first one is energy. Now, as we know, Hungary is one of the European countries that continues to rely heavily on Russian energy and has also refused to reduce this dependency after the Ukraine war. So this will be a big point today. Hungary and the US have signed an LNG contract last year, and today the two foreign ministers will sign a cooperation agreement on nuclear civil energy. So this is one main point. The second big point will be, as they call it, shared security interests in the region. The Hungarian governing party likes to portray itself as an advocate for peace, and of course Donald Trump likes to do the same. They also like to applaud Donald Trump for his efforts for peace. So the way towards peace talks, as they like to frame it, will be another big item. And this already kind of gives us an idea that because this peace narrative is such a big issue in the campaign, the fact that this whole visit is happening in the campaign is, of course, one of the main points today as well.
Tell us about the campaign and the Prime Minister's need for a boost. What's going on?
Yes, so as you mentioned, Prime Minister Viktor Orban is facing one of the biggest challenges during his 16-year reign. And this is, of course, on his side being portrayed as a massive success that they like to portray themselves as the party who can get Hungary a place at the table with the big nations in the world like the US. So they, of course, play heavily into this narrative that they are the ones who can guarantee Hungarian interests internationally. Now, domestically, of course, it's a different question whether or not this is actually going to help. Experience shows that voters are more likely to decide on domestic issues. Cost of living and inflation is very high in Hungary. Many people are concerned with the state of healthcare and also, for example, transport infrastructure. So it's more likely that these things will be decisive in an election. But nonetheless, Fidesz and Viktor Orban are really doubling down on this strategy as well to show their good ties to the US.
Marco Rubio was in Slovakia on Sunday for talks with Robert Fico, another pro-Trump leader. How do Hungarians feel about being part of a kind of European pro-MAGA axis?
Yes, this is interesting. So a recent poll by the European Council on Foreign Relations shows that Hungarians are still among the countries in Europe that have the strongest support for Donald Trump and his administration. But this is still just about slightly more than a quarter of the population. And also, while Hungarians are aware that they need the US as an ally and they are, in a position that they have to cooperate with the US, they are not necessarily convinced that the US is actually a very strong ally in the sense that it's necessarily good for Hungary that Donald Trump is in the White House. So it's a mixed picture, and like we said, it's not necessarily the topic that voters are likely to decide on when it comes to the elections on April 12th.
Thank you for that. DW correspondent Ferenc Gaal in Budapest.